Good afternoon, and welcome to this week's Building Power. I am your host, Zakia Sankara Jabbar, and I am excited to welcome my brother and friend, Maurice Cook, who is the founder and director of Serve Your City DC. We wanted to, he's also one of the brightbeam activists, holding it down in Washington, D.C., doing a lot of amazing work. You'll hear a little bit more about that. Just want to share a little bit more about our brother before we allow him to come on and share what he likes. Just a little bit background about Brother Maurice, as he's raised in Maryland and DC. Maurice was the first male in his family to attend college, eventually earning his master's degree. His love of his hometown, coupled with his frustration with systemic racism experienced by Black and Brown youth in Washington, D.C., and of course throughout the country, drove Maurice to create Serve Your City in 2009 and to step up as a leader in the Ward 6 Mutual Aid Network, which has done amazing work responding since the pandemic of COVID-19 struck in March 2020. Maurice lives in the Capitol Hill neighborhood with his wife, Jackie. Maurice, I was reading, I was like, dang, our brother live in Capitol Hill. I was like, y'all got some money down there at Capitol Hill. Shoot, I'm like, them houses down there $1 million now, ain't it?
Now, of course, when I got mine, it wasn't $1 million. You know,
I got you.
You know what I'm saying? And listen, and the thing is, it could have been $2 and we would have moved to the same neighborhood, right?
That's right.
Because we didn't move here for some opportunity to build wealth. That wasn't why, that wasn't the purpose. Because when we moved to the neighborhood, it wasn't like that. It was very different.
Exactly. Yeah. No,
so,
the gentrification is real. We know it. The gentrification is real in DC. Tell us a little bit more about you, though, brother. Tell us a little bit more about your background. Know you from Montgomery County. I'll share really quickly because this is really important, I think, to the story. You know, you were one of the first people to like really welcome me and my family with open arms when we relocated here. And my son actually had he was able to experience Serve Your City. He did the rowing, and I was just like, this is amazing. They got programs like this in DC, you know, and he enjoyed it. The tennis, everything that you offer, you know, to young people. And of course, we just drove him there. The swimming, you know, which he was already an athletic swimmer before we moved from Ohio to here. So it was just really an all around great experience, to be honest with you. And I just take my hat off to you to provide those kind of opportunities, alternative kind of sports, if you will, for Black children in Washington, D.C. And tell us a little bit more about what you got going on today and a little bit more about the inspiration behind Serve Your City.
So, yeah, you know, it starts from grandma, you know, grandma, you know, the blessing for me is that in Montgomery County, I was born into a village, you know, born into a Black village. I was protected and uplifted and exalted, you know, being a man, you know, a young man. I'm the first grandbaby. And so, you know, all the Black people know what that's like. And so grandma, you know, I got to see some of the old world, you know, and the old world was when this system didn't have any of us in it, right? We weren't mainstreamed or co-opted. The civil rights movement, even though the laws had been passed, the practices hadn't been implemented yet. And so, you know, in the early 70s, you know, I'm part of this Black collective, you know, really Black network. And I got to see the methods that we use to do, you know, they call it mutual aid, but what it really, for Black people, it's mutual survival. For brown people, I'm sure it's mutual survival. And so that's what it really is. And so learning those skills, I didn't realize I had those skills, but learning those skills was very important. And you know, growing up in Montgomery County, you know, Montgomery County is the have and have nots, right? And
yeah, I know, I live here now.
Yeah, the have and have nots. But the have nots, they have such great access to the resources, the spillage of the haves. And I learned, I was telling this story just recently. You know how I learned I was poor? Because I went to, when I went to school, I went to this middle school. They had to bus us there to a middle school. I went to this middle school and started making friends. I had a lot of new white people, right? Being introduced to a lot of new white people. But when I realized that some of these people had 2 phones in their house, I said, oh no, what is going on? Somebody did something wrong to me. And so I learned that people had 2 phones in their house, and I said, something's going on. And then I just learned. I just saw, what the issue was. I mean, just as smart as them, the personality on time, everything, just as talented as them. But I didn't have the foundational resources to compete on that level. And so I was angry. I was angry. And it's like, what do you want? Do you want to be in a world where it's just y'all are just poor altogether? Or do you want to actually see how the other half lives, right? And so I lived with the pain and the rejection of not having enough money to take advantage of so many opportunities.
Wow.
Now I learned how to get them opportunities myself, right? As a kid, I did what I must. I had some street games, some street hustle. And so all I've done with Serve Your City is brought those same skills of us being able to utilize the resources that we have right in front of us. And getting those resources that we deserve. And so that's what it's all about. And the programs that we have with Serve Your City, we do the non-traditional black programs.
I know. My son had an opportunity to experience it, and he still talks about it. The role, I mean, things have had to change because of COVID, and that's really unfortunate. But man, he really loved rowing. And he loves swimming. And so those are those non-traditional sports, if you will, that young people can literally get scholarships to go to college for. And so that was kind of like my thinking, too, like, okay, we're going to get him involved in some kind of rowing in one of these high schools out here in Montgomery County. And I remember you shared with me, you were like, well, these are the schools that have rowing in the high schools. And so that to me, like, I started looking, because I wanted to try to find a balance between academics, certainly having the proper academics that I want, my son have access to. And then also, the non-traditional sports. And of course, now he's totally into basketball because of, peer pressure and all of his friends. And certainly where we live, that's what is available. Basketball is out. They were playing basketball last night out in the cold. These kids, like, we got to get out of the house. So I'm sure you see that in DC as well.
Every day. And that's what I had back in Montgomery County. And so I did have those things, accessible to me. But then you had this other swath of kids who had all these other activities that cost so much money to participate in, right? And these are the country club sports. And so the country club sports, the rowing, the tennis, the swimming, all those types of things, golf, all that's the country club sports. And
that's funny you call it that. I'm going to start using that, the country club sports that we normally don't see Black children doing. Yeah,
that's exactly right. Now in the country club sports, this is where all the policymakers make their decisions. This is the network that we don't have access to. This is like when they bring one of us in there, oh, you got access, you got a seat at the table. And I said, no. Let's just create a table for ourselves. So we have the only majority Black and brown youth rowing crew here in Washington, D.C.
I love it.
Yeah, we do swim, not just swim, but we do swim, snorkel, scuba diving. And a dream of mine for my retirement is to go around the world watching these kids scuba dive. And I want the white people to pay for that, because that's the world that we need to have in the first place. That's my retirement, right? So I get to chill on the boat, watch the kids do scuba dive and get some environmental, education and marine education and all that stuff. And I'm going to be chilling, enjoying me and Jackie's retirement, and traveling around the world.
I love that, Maurice. That's funny you bring that up, because my Amir, my son, he actually has a natural inclination to marine life. Like he loves that part, and of course, where we lived at in Dayton, there was just not access to any of that rowing or any of that stuff. So I just, my hats off to you for thinking outside of the box and giving that kind of access to young Black and brown, as you say, the country club sports that we normally don't have access to.
Right. And look, and all of our coaches are brothers, right?
Yeah.
And so I find these crazy brothers that are doing this stuff, and they look, they trailblazers, and they all wild and crazy. Because they're trailblazers, because they like the only ones doing the stuff that they do, and all they want to do is bring our people to these resources and these activities. And
Yeah.
so, they see
There's full ride
themselves.
scholarships for rowers.
Yeah,
Full
well,
ride for swimmers, all of that. Yeah.
well, rowing gives out the most academic scholarships for girls.
Mm.
You get eight at a time because they're always trying to build teams. But
Mm-hmm.
that the brothers can't. I mean, if we got into rowing, we take rowing over. We would. I mean, so me. Look, remember? Remember how Jackie Robinson had that white owner to say, "Okay, I'm gonna bring some players over from the Negro leagues to do that." Why a white man got to be part of that story? I'm trying to be that. I'm trying to be that.
Trying to be the white guy.
Well, I'm trying to be him, right? I'm building my own Jackie Robinsons. You know what I'm saying? Change the narrative.
I love it.
So no, Silver City, it's a blessing. And now that school's crazy, we had to obviously shift because most of the activities are outside of the school system. Because I learned when I first started, I tried to work with those people.
I know.
And those people have post-traumatic slave disorder. And our people have such a limited expectation of our own well-being.
Yeah.
And that's not our fault. That's not our fault. But I'm not having it, right? I'm not going to play along with that. And so I couldn't work directly within the school system.
Right.
Right.
I get it.
And so when schools closed down, we had to shift.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. And I remember, that shift and we'll get into a little bit of that. But I actually wanted to see if we can talk a little bit about, and I know you and I have talked offline a little bit, but see if you want to share a little bit about your reaction, how you felt, how your team felt at Serve Your City, just your family, right? Your wife and other people, about what happened last week with, white supremacists, Trump supporters. I had, sadly, that is interchangeable these days. Storming, or honestly, they were really let in. If you look at some of the tapes, I don't know how much they stormed it because they kind of were let in to the House where they were voting to certify the election for Mr. Biden, and the response of saying, the National Guard and all this stuff, you right there on Capitol Hill. So I mean, just want to give you an opportunity to reflect on that. Based on your experiences growing up here as well.
Well, if we're honest, they've been radicalizing us since Trayvon Martin. I mean, well, I started in '89. God is funny. God's got a sense of humor because I was ready for the showdown back in '89 when I was young and on my feet. I could run and I could hurt somebody. The whole thing. Ever since they did what they did to Brother Rodney King, I've been hurt since '89, and for God to bring it some 30-some years later, I mean, it's just what a journey. But my escalation has been rising. I mean, just every time they put us on camera and they kill us, my escalation rises. And so this is a accumulation of all of that. All of that just comes into bear every time this kind of stuff happens. And then I found my silly butt in Charlottesville that day, and I made a decision that saved my life and a couple of other people's lives, because it was very close. And, I've been having no tolerance for it since Charlottesville, because we saw what they were willing to do over a statue. Okay. All that was over a statue. And so I've been trying to tell everybody, nobody want to listen to me. I've been trying to tell everybody. But when what happened last week, and this neighborhood was on fire last week. They were all around, not just on Wednesday, but they came a couple of days before.
I saw that. Yeah.
And to see groups of 4 to 10 white people on different corners in Washington, D.C., white men in Washington, D.C., huddled up the way they were, I was disgusted.
I bet.
Because this could have never happened between 1977 and 1997.
Ooh, come on. Talk about that. Talk
And so
about that. What do you mean by that?
this is another consequence of gentrification. They've forced us to be huddled in together, right, and separate. And that's the beautiful history that I'm so nostalgic about today, because that's what I normalize. Beautiful Black space. And now that they want this territory back, they diffuse, they remove us, we disappear, but most importantly and structurally, they diffuse our power. And I'm telling you, in 1977, from 1977 to 1997, there's no way that these white people would have been able to roam free in Washington, D.C. And so to me, that is the greatest loss of self-determination for Black people. Because if they can do this in Washington, D.C., in a Black city, we're still a majority Black city, but we're so diffused
You're
throughout.
barely hanging on to that majority Black, barely hanging on.
But if they can do this in Washington, D.C., that means they can do this anywhere in America.
That's
certain.
right.
I'm certain of it. And so that's the part that hurt me the most. And I get PTSD when all this stuff comes up, and not because of the Klan. They are who they are. America made them a promise, and they're gonna fight to keep, make sure America keeps that promise, right? And so I get them, I understand them, but it's the response from the rest of us.
Yeah.
Because we all have some type of relationship with this thing. We all have some type of relationship. And for us, we're trying to still figure out, how do we survive among so many that hate our very being? How do we survive?
Question, isn't it? Isn't that the question? That's the question. I feel like that's the question for all of us. How are you, having this conversation with your team? I know you have access to a lot of young people, right? You are working primarily with young Black youth and brown youth in Washington, D.C. Can you share a little bit more about some of those conversations you all have had in response to what happened last week?
Well, look, I'm old school because I got the old people in me. I tell them straight up.
I love that.
I tell them,
love it.
I tell them straight up. I don't know about y'all's 21st sensibilities, you parents, and all this stuff, but I tell them exactly what it is, and we have to be prepared. And I make sure that they understand that what we need is something new, something different. I don't believe, and listen, I got 400 some years of receipts, that this system is going to do what is necessary to keep us safe. I just don't believe it. And unfortunately, we can't, I don't have that trust. I have records, I have data, I have demonstration, tangible assessment and metrics about the promises versus the outcomes. I got all that. But what we don't have is, any assurity that they would sacrifice something to ensure that the rest of us aren't harmed.
That's a great lead in to this next question, because you and I are like joined at the hip. We talked over the break. You've been getting hit in a couple of different directions, and I want to give you an opportunity to just talk and share a little bit about that. First of all, there is some kind of hit piece that was written about you, about mutual aid being started by some white Marxists and all this other kind of stuff. So we could talk about that. I know, isn't that hilarious? Like they don't know about the benevolent societies that Black people started right here in Washington, D.C., the True Reformer building right down there in the Shaw area, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, I'll give you opportunity to share a little bit about that. But the other thing is that happened recently, and I got involved because it hurt my feelings, the language that a white woman, a white ANC commissioner, if you can explain to the audience what ANC commissioner means in Washington, D.C., is targeting our Black youth. She's literally targeting our Black youth, and she's basically calling them little rapists and future criminals and everything. I believe you had an opportunity to address her at a meeting last night. Can we give the audience a little bit of background about that? Maybe let's do that first, and then we can go back and talk about the hit piece that was written on you.
So the advisory neighborhood commissions were created in the late 60s, early 70s in Washington, D.C. as a way for community-led power. A group of activists and organizers in the 60s, late 60s, were trying to have some control of the community space because there were plans, the city had plans for development, right? And so a group of community members came together and petitioned and advocated and protested to create this hyper-local government entity, right, called the Advisory Neighborhood Commissions. And these would be our most hyper-local elected officials, where people within the neighborhood could vote for these folks, and they would be representative for those people to the city council, right, and to the mayor's office. And right at that point, we were still a serfdom, and so we had really no control over our own self-determination back in the 60s and 70s. And so this hyper-local entity was built to create a neighborhood community center in Adams Morgan, and they were successful. And so for the last 50 years, 45 to 50 years, we have this hyper-local political entity called the Advisory Neighborhood Commission. Now, these were Black and brown people who created this, and they were fighting development, which is kind of ironic. And now, 50 years later, it has been totally co-opted by the white gentrifiers in Washington, D.C. And so we've had our Advisory Neighborhood Commission started by the movement space, movement activists and organizers, co-opted, taken away from us. And so this is why you see, these are the little things of why Washington, D.C. looks the way that it does now, today. So in my local ANC commission, there's this woman, her name is Denise Krepp, and she's a commissioner and white woman, and constantly on the listservs and through her official ANC email listserv that she has, and Twitter and all of this, she constantly seeks over policing to make her and her constituents, quote unquote constituents, feel more comfortable and safe. They absolutely moved into the hood, okay? And thus far,
they moved into the hood, and her goal is to use law enforcement to drive out the original inhabitants or the indigenous population in Washington, which is Black.
And you know, she goes too far. She goes too far. She thinks she's an advocate for the victims and all of this and all of that, because you do have, you know, DC is one of those animals where you do have some Black property owners who are on that ish, right? Who are absolutely on that ish. And so she gets enough of them.
Would you call it the post-traumatic slave disorder, and they're being used by white supremacists?
Exactly.
White supremacists are not just white men, right?
No, they are absolutely not. We all have a role, don't we? You know what I'm saying? We all have a role. But so she tries to have her own personal police force, the Metropolitan Police Department, to over police our communities and to make us feel as if we are aliens or foreigners in our own communities. And see, someone like me, I purposely moved to Washington, D.C. permanently to hide so that I can be anonymous. Because, you know, in Montgomery County, I stick out, you know what I'm saying? So I moved to Washington, D.C. permanently in 1988 and I always knew I was going to come here because I wanted to just blend in. I wanted that power all the time. I didn't want to be othered. And so a lot of my fight is coming from pain and hurt, because that was stolen. That protection was stolen away from me. It was stolen away from all the Black people that live here. Now, in our own communities, we're the minority within our own communities. And people like Denise, who is in a position of power, has the capacity to be in a position of power, has the education to be in a position of power, has the resources to be in a position of power, can utilize this system's power that was created by Black and brown activists. She can utilize this to over police us in our own communities. and it's a challenge. And last night I was at a meeting with all the other commissioners and her, and I straight out said, what you won't do is use the events of last Wednesday to call for more security and police in our neighborhood, because beyond the fear of those Klan Nazis, beyond the fear of them being in our community, we have to look on both sides, because we have a structural oppression being manifested upon us every day, all day. And at the end of the day, none of us Black people, how are we supposed to tell who was who? How are we supposed to tell the good ones from the bad ones?
You better tell the truth. That's right.
And so why do we?
Because let me. Because see, what's her name? Denise, the ANC commissioner.
Yeah.
See, to me, people like her, like you described, like who are more sophisticated in their white supremacy and racism, in my opinion, are the ones to be afraid of the most. The Klan Nazis, you can see them coming because they loud. They coming with pitchforks. They telling you out the gate, I don't like N-words or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But it's the Denises of the world who are intelligent, as you mentioned, who know how to organize certain elements even within our community to call other Black people, potential rapists and criminals. And we need to get those people out. We need to other, human beings, and not just human beings. We're talking about children. She specifically is targeting Black children in that tweet. And I wanted to say, she eventually blocked me because you tagged me. And I know you tagged me because you wanted some backup and I gave it to you. So when she actually blocked me, so I can no longer see her posts and everything. But I did bring up the fact that, okay, so you're specifically targeting Black children here. And I think that's to me, that's the issue, is that you're going to use your intelligence and white supremacy to sick police. And we see the police, as you said, on TV constantly killing Black people, Black male bodies all over the place. And you still organize a police element against Black children? That's all I need to know about you.
That's all we need to know, under the guise of serving the community. And I tagged you, sister, because look, you're stronger than me. And so, I have to put you out front. I'll be right behind you running my mouth, but if you lead the charge, I'm right behind you. I will shoot. So I tagged you because you got that omega power. We talked about it. You got that omega power. And we need to come together as a people, a community, to attack it wherever we see it, right? You got everybody up in arms about what those fools did last Wednesday. I'm talking about the MPD search and seizure stops, the stop and frisk stops, the no knock stops, the jump out cars. I'm talking about the suspensions. I'm talking about, us not having computers, devices, us not having the internet. I'm talking about our people who sleep on the street. Some of those people who got beat up last weekend, right? Some of those people who lived on the street got beat up last weekend
by the white supremacists. And I did not see that on the news. No one has looked out for our unhoused people, which again in DC are mostly Black. And if we're honest, at least from what I see, they're mostly Black men. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, they're mostly Black men. And so and so we have to fight them everywhere. And look, our own in DC, our own people, again, accept a level of marginalization of our condition here. And we're not going to change it unless we get behind you, Zakia. Like me, I'm going to get behind you, and we're going to do this thing that we have to do. We just have to do the work.
Well, let's lean into that a little bit. I mean, we've talked about like some of the results of gentrification. Do we want to talk about the complicity of elected officials who look like us, who actually helped gentrification start? And I mean, I'm new to this area. My husband, however, as you know, grew up in DC, and there was a comment earlier that said they had PTSD when they saw there was a Walmart on Georgia Avenue, and my husband, he said we drove down 8th Street, and he said you would never see white people walking down 8th Street with no dog or nothing like that when he was growing up. He was like, DC is completely different.
There's a Whole Foods.
Right, Whole Foods. He was like, what? Because I remember when because we would come back and visit because his mom lives here. My husband's whole immediate family, mom, dad, brother, everybody's here. And we would come back and visit before we moved, and he was just like, wow. you know,
Mm-hmm.
like we would be in the city driving around. And but I've heard different stories from different activists. As you know, I'm plugged into a bunch of the activists. Love my people over at BLM DC, Brother
Mm-hmm.
Anthony, Sister Nene. I mean, strong brothers and sisters
Mm-hmm.
running the BLM DC. And
Mm-hmm.
I've heard from different activist groups that it was Fenty, I believe, that put the nail in the coffin or really sealed the deal on gentrification, but also what happened with the schools and the mass closings and stuff. I just
Mm-hmm.
want to give you an opportunity to maybe share, since you've been in the city since '88 and really
Mm-hmm.
all your life, because Montgomery County is a rock throw away.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, it's the suburbs. So
Mm-hmm.
just share a little bit from your perspective about how gentrification really happened and who was at the helm to sign the document to have it happen.
You know, it's a tough question because it's
Yeah.
nuanced. But the plan, I believe, started in the late 80s. And see, then it makes you think, like I believe, this is my opinion, there was a planned disinvestment for the strategic reinvestment.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
So all the things, you know, I'm 50. And so in in the 20th century, a lot of time in the 20th century, the cities were black havens across the nation, right? And we were forced to stay in certain areas within the city while they suburbanized, right? So we can take this all the way back to Levittown, really, if you think about it, in
Yeah.
the 30s and 40s and 50s. And so we all know what happened in the city. Somehow we had a crack cocaine industry in our cities, and we don't got no one cocoa bush in not one of these cities. So somehow they found their way. But that's the city landscape that I grew up in, where cities were black, dangerous, and cheap, right? But there was a internal infrastructure, the village, where we were absolutely practicing our mutual survival. Okay, and here it was rough, especially obviously with the gun violence. Very rough, dangerous place. But there was a love because it was all of us.
Conditions created that, right? Like
Exactly.
this investment, which didn't hit cities like Dayton, you know, where I relocated from until much later. And it's now the same plan. You're seeing in even small cities like a Dayton and the Omahas, you know, these little small cities that are kind of like off the beaten path in the Midwest are starting to see some of the same things that happened in Detroit, Cleveland, Chicago, even Washington,
Baltimore,
Baltimore,
Philadelphia.
cities, right?
Mhm.
It's
So
heartbreaking.
it is heartbreaking to live long enough to see what has happened. It manifests. But what they did was here after Marion Barry, because they couldn't handle Marion Barry, because they couldn't manipulate him, right? And Marion Barry kept his love on the street where it belonged, right? They had an administrator, Anthony Williams, Anthony Bowtie Williams, okay?
Stop it, Maurice.
And he is the architect, okay?
He's
He
black, right? Anthony
Oh
Bowtie
yeah,
Williams. He's black. Okay.
Anthony Bowtie Williams. He is the architect of the Washington. He's still here, making a lot of money. Works for this so-called nonprofit with the Council of 100 and all this. You know, he's done very well for the black middle class. Those who've been able to, extract all of these resources. Okay, and everyone else, Fenty, Gray, Bowser, they've all just been kind of co-signing on that train that Anthony Williams he built the foundation, the architect. And it's tough. I mean, and so we have a class of black people who have incredible six-figure jobs, and who have seen
At the expense of the black poor and working class. I think we
exactly.
need to be very clear, which is
Very
the
clear.
majority of black people anywhere in this country, poor and working class black folks. And we don't talk about that enough.
The divide between in Washington, D.C., you should see the divide between the Black middle class and the Black working class. It doesn't exist anywhere else. It doesn't exist anywhere else. And if you talk about the region, it doesn't exist anywhere else. And it's really been at the sacrifice of right now, at least 40% of the Black people who remain here. Listen, in 78 or in 1980, I think we had 78% Black population. Now we have 48%.
Wow.
And so what I said in that meeting, we have lost so many Black people in this neighborhood, in this community.
They've been pushed out to PG County in Northern Virginia.
Yeah, they're gone. And some have just disappeared. We don't know where they are. And so at the same time, you talked about what happened in our school system. Then our school system was co-opted.
Let's talk about that. Tell us from your perspective, what happened with the schools?
Oh, they got an infusion of neoliberalism.
Lord have mercy. Define that for people who may not know what that means on our audience.
That means reform politics. That means measurable outcomes politics, right? That means standardized test assessments, teacher evaluation assessments. They use these tools to fire a whole generation of Black teachers, to bring in young Teach for America, white and other teachers who are not from here. And the guise of professionalizing the profession. And so,
wait a minute. So the Black teachers who worked there before weren't professional? What?
Exactly. Accountable, professional. We need our education to be more accountable. All of these things. But what they were really saying is, we are preparing the landscape for white children to come to school here.
Damn.
So it was part of the package. And then
there was a lot of school closings. Like I know Parisa over at Empower DC, they filed a lawsuit that they lost, unfortunately, to stop. And they're still fighting for the housing. You know, Empower DC does great work out here in DC.
Yep, they're fighting for Ivy City. And what happened was that was the creation of the charter school movement.
Oh, okay.
It all ties together. I mean,
for DC.
For DC.
Yeah.
And let's think about it maybe nationally. I mean, think about it. I mean, for DC, there was no need for a separate system, right? Until the white people came. I'm just gonna say it.
Wow.
I'm just gonna say it. Check out the time of when it started and what was happening with development and what was happening with the price of living, the cost of living, what was happening to the housing market. It's all tied together.
As they say, interconnected, right?
That's right. And so,
and your city is still trying to serve, right? And you're specifically in Ward 6. So for people who don't know, who are watching, there's 8 wards, right? Mm-hmm. in Washington. Tell us a little bit more about the demographics for Ward 6 and why the focus is there for young people.
So I'm just hubbed in Ward 6. I live in Ward 6, and that's the center. Just my network. That's the center of where we do things. But we serve students from all over the place, all over the city. And
I know.
We would serve any student. I don't care, you know, because we're not taking any conditions and doing the work necessary for our people to have everything that we deserve. You cannot create a condition for us, and that's just the way that it's going to be. But Ward 6 in 2000. 60% Black, 30% white. In 2017, 60% white, 30% Black. Ward 6 is the largest ward of the city geographically, touching all 4 quadrants, and it has the most people. It's the most populous ward by far. And now things may change because of the new census allocation, because you change, the census creates kind of the ward political alignment and association. So when the census numbers comes out for 2020, that may change, but we have the most people and we're the largest geographic ward in the city, and it's just.
But the most children are in Ward 8. I think the last time I heard Trayon Martin, not Trayon White, the representative for Ward 8.
Yeah, the most kids in the city are in Ward 8, in Ward 7 and 8, but Ward 8, yeah, definitely. But that's going to change. Oh, that's going to change. And so what we do is we make sure our resources get out to everywhere. And we're beside Ward 7 and Ward 8. We're right beside them. And we have the resources to do more to support Ward 7 and Ward 8. We're going to work to keep doing that. We're going to work to keep doing that. But yeah, the school system and the housing market, and certainly the rising budget line item of the police department, all these things go the militarization of the police, all of it. If you track all three things over the last 20 years, you will see some correlation. I promise you.
What can be done about that? I mean, I know you've spent some time thinking about it. I know I've certainly spent some time thinking about it. And when I think about sort of what's happening now in terms of we're going through a shift in our economy, where the economy is going to be much more technologically driven, much more automated, autonomous, robotics, all of that. What do you think that means? I mean, I know you spend a lot of time thinking about these things and kind of like thinking ahead and planning ahead. For me, I have to be honest with you. I'm a little scared because I feel like, and when I think about for Black people and the kids that we're talking about, I feel like we're woefully underprepared for what's coming.
We are woefully underprepared for what's coming. We've been hurt for a couple generations. We're woefully underprepared. And honestly, I just think it's been the dullness of the civil rights movement. I really do. It's, while it's a blessing that you and I can have this incredible education and these opportunities, it's the devil that prevents the rest of our people from being able to have the same opportunities and resources. But let me tell you where there's hope.
Yeah.
Let me tell you where there's some hope. And so I was on a call last night about with some tech people about a plan to get internet broadband to our people, right? And they created this pilot for a couple of months to provide internet to some of our folks who live in public housing in my neighborhood. And they only did a pilot. And one of the reasons why they can't keep doing it is because of the cost and all this, and because they're working with DCHA. And I said, well, if you're working with DCHA, then you're complicit in collusion with DCHA. Of course, that's not going to work. You can't work with any entity or authority that normalizes the subjugation of our people. That's the problem. And so, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and just give every community rec room at each public housing project in Washington, D.C. a hotspot. I'm just going to do it. Free internet for a year. And listen, I've been trying to tell, I made this offer to Black and brown-led community organizations. Hardly anybody has gotten back in touch with me. You know why? Because our people don't understand. They don't know what, we are hurt and we don't even know what we're looking at. And so I have to kind of find a way to communicate. Hey, listen, free internet for a year is cheaper than paying $1 for your current internet service.
Amen.
Zakia, help me. Help me help our people. Help me. That's $12.
Well, I'm going to give you another lens to that, right? You also have to think about, the do-gooder mentality that has impacted Black communities over the years. And lots of times what has been perpetuated to us as what's good for us or it's free, people have found out later, oh, it really wasn't free. You see what I'm saying? So, I mean, there's some history to, people coming into the community, and oftentimes they'll use somebody that looks like us to say, this is good for you. This is gonna work out and it's free. And honestly, I'm gonna be honest with you. I know it's not completely connected, but what keeps coming to mind or popping up is the Tuskegee experiment, that happened, as you know. And so there's some history of distrust for people who are always coming to tell us what's free. Because in the back of our mind, we know ain't nothing free.
Well, it's not free for us to acquire it.
Right.
But it's free for us to have it. because we've already worked for it. We deserve it. But hey, look, you got my crazy ass coming with the dreads, looking like I'm just coming off the street, offering all these reasons. So you had to cross the threshold, didn't you? And so all the people have to do is have one conversation with me, and so that I can explain to them what this is. We already deserve and have worked for everything that this world can give us. There's nothing more that we have to do. And so if that means that I have to take those resources from the people who are hoarding it, then that's exactly what we're going to do. That's what we have to do. It's never going to be given to us. Thank you, Grandma. Thank you, Mama, for telling me that. It's never going to be given to us. And so we just have to have that conversation. Basically, what I did was I paid for 50 hotspots, spent $30,000 on the hotspots for a year's worth of service. I'm going to cover those costs through grants and fundraising. Okay. And what I want to do, get my money back, because I'm Black and I deserve my reparations. And why is a Black man solving, having to be burdened by not having the internet and coming up with the solution when all these other people got the internet? Why is that? And so I'm going to get my money back. And then I'm going to
let's talk about it's really needed at this moment because DCPS and the DC, all the DC schools, from my understanding, are still all online. And there are young people who have not been able to access education since the pandemic started. You want to share a little bit more about the data that you have on that?
Yes, well, my data is we've given out 600 devices, both laptops and tablets. We're continuing to do. We're going to continue to do that. We built a refurbishing team in order to refurbish older computers. We've saved some money to purchase tablets in bulk. We're building a computer company. We purchased 50 hotspots to be able to provide internet service for Black-led community organizations, and we're going to continue to parlay that to build more. The whole brightbeam team, they're going to get their 5 devices, and Sister Tanisha's going to get her 10 because she bombed, right? And we're just going to keep doing it. We're going to take care of each other. And so that's the hope. We're going to go back to mutual survival. Soon enough, more and more people, because this place gets greedier and crazier by the minute, people are coming to us because they recognize what this monster looks like now. They saw it. They saw what this thing looks like. And of course, the greed knows no end, and it just drives people towards us. We will get back to the mutual survival tactic that we've used since we've gotten here. And it is a true tested methodology of our collective survival. But we do have to have these conversations more and more. There's a class of more and more of us, our own people, who are content with the status quo.
That's what breaks my heart the most.
I mean,
and I don't know, it breaks my heart the most. Like just talking to our people, letting them know that you deserve more. You don't have to settle for just anything. What are some of the strategies that you're using with your team and, with your network of community activists and organizers to, I don't know, I guess, build the self-esteem of the community to, that resistance like that exists, that burns in you and I? How do you ignite that in the part of the community that, are okay with the status quo?
Well, listen, everybody unfortunately has to pick a side. And so I just work through them. I outwork them. And what I do is I focus on the rest of us, right? So I force 2 young brothers to come up here every day and pretend as if they're working, and so that I pay them so that they can learn exactly what it's going to take. And these are brothers from the community. They know the community. They in the community. They don't have to go nowhere. And then they're going to build this computer business on their own. There's this weekend they're starting an AA plus computer programming to maintain our app. They've learned the delivery system. They deliver food and supplies and goods to our people every day. So I'm going to teach the young people how to do this, and we're just going to do it ourselves. And if our people who want to work with that other thing, great, that's on the table, right? That's a tool, a tactic. But what we're not going to do is come with our hands out. And so, to me, you get the white people to make the demands in the system that's created to benefit them, and you get the Black people who they work for.
I love that strategy. Okay.
Yeah, you get the black people who work for them. Okay, you continue to work for them, and then the rest of us, we just build the necessary networks, relationships, and acquire the resources to go ahead and do the damn thing. That's it. That's it. We were blessed. We were last week, like, I told you, we go down to the tent encampments every week, right? We're now in. We start off with one tent encampment with about 50 tents, and now we're out 4 days a week, right? Going to different tent encampments throughout the city, beyond Ward 6, and now
there's more because of the eviction crisis.
Right.
I want people to listen to you. You are talking about tent encampments, tent cities in the nation's capital, in the seat of power, where billions of dollars are talked about on Capitol Hill, are transferred, whatever. And meanwhile, we got black folks who built the country. Most of them are descendants of Africans enslaved in this country, built the White House. I think it's time for us to put it in context. Built the White House. And we got 10 cities of black folks.
Oh, a block from the Capitol.
That's unacceptable.
On both sides of the Capitol, blocks from the Capitol. And so while, all of the folks who may want to cheer these electoral victories,
I don't give it. You know how I feel about that.
Listen, okay, that's just a tactic. Okay, but guess what? I'm not going to wait around. Okay, so get the white people to do the petitioning, the testimonies, the policies, the data, all of that stuff. Prove our condition when everybody knows what the situation is. Prove our condition, and for us, just organize those that are harmed the most by this thing to create, not challenging or trying to reform that thing. I mean, if folks want to do that, great. But I'm talking about building what's necessary, building the things that we actually need in order to survive, so that we have a choice of whether to put our hand out to that monster or not. I hate the choice, right? I prefer us not to, because we never get what we need. It's only been 400 years. How much longer do y'all have to see? And so I'm not talking about not being included in that thing, but believe me, I don't believe that we can. Well, one, when we try to climb to it, it puts us in debt. It puts us in debt. We start off in the red, we end in the red. We don't have the generational wealth. We'll never acquire, they'll never equal the wealth gap. They'll never make the wealth gap right. We will never get what we've already worked for so that everyone else can benefit. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. And so while, T'Challa's gone, my brother passed, Wakanda can still exist. And we just have to build that thing. We have to do that work. And we've never had more of an opportunity and more support and more allies to support our building it, us building it. We can do it. I said the other day, if I was smart 30 years ago, I would have started building Noah's Ark, and I didn't. Daggone. I didn't. I could have used all this energy to just go ahead and build Noah's Ark and sail the hell out of here. You know what I'm saying? But I always say we deserve 5 minutes to be free of this. Can you imagine what we would feel like just knowing we were getting on a boat to build something new, to become something new? Our ancestors already had a boat ride over here. Can you imagine their children having a boat ride away and what all that would mean? I mean, what a beautiful vision, But I do know in order for us to heal, we deserve time away. How are we going to heal by a place that harms us perpetually, constantly living in fear all the time?
Can I tell you that's one of the reasons why it makes me physically ill when I see these headlines about electoral politics? Black people save the nation. What? Black people are the heroes. We saved. Excuse me. I'm sorry. It's almost like they're trying to slick way pathologize us, because why would we want to save a nation that has treated us and continues to treat us, right, as non-citizens, as inhumane? We see examples of it every day. The fact that there was collusion between, I mean, there's going to be investigations, but clearly, one of the organizers of last week, right, one of the organizers of last week's so-called rally or whatever to stop the steal, whatever they're saying, they had congressional help. They had Capitol Police help. Well, when Black Lives Matter had the righteous indignation, okay, when George Floyd was killed on TV in front of all of us, that we saw it run over and over and over again, and there were uprisings in every city across this country, they were met with armed police, armed National Guard. They couldn't even get within feet of the Capitol. So I don't, this idea that it's almost like they're low key pathologizing us, because who would save something like that? I think the correct narrative is that we're continue to be given choices where we have to, or in my opinion, we don't have to, because I'm past that. But there are a lot of Black people who feel like, well, we have to pick the lesser of two evils. We want the lesser of the white supremacy. And to me, that's a non-choice, because I don't want none of it. In my opinion, you know how I feel about electoral politics. And then also this idea that, voting for Democratic politicians, especially for those of us who live on the East Coast, especially for those of us who have lived in Democratic run cities and states, like, cities like Dayton, who's been run by Democrats for I don't know how long, cities like states like Maryland, and counties like Montgomery County, which is supposed to be the liberal bastion of the country, DC ran by. No, that save. Y'all better talk to Black people who live in these cities in the South. I get it. There are people. I grew up in Alabama, right? I grew up in the rural South in the Black Belt. So I'm not talking about an experience that I have not had in living in the rural South, because people will push back on me and say, was a kid, it's different down here. The Republicans are different, and it's different. I get it. It is different geographically. But the idea that you all think you're being saved by voting for this other thing, we need to build autonomous power. And I think to your point earlier, there's a fear in building that for some reason. Mm-hmm. I don't know what your reflections are on this, but like I said, you know how I feel about that. Don't say we saved the nation. We saved ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Let's add some historical context into this, right?
Please.
Let's talk about the Civil War. Okay. So I'm supposed to believe that a people that kidnapped us, committed human trafficking, genocided, raped, worked, enslaved their own children for money. Okay. Their own children, right? And made their own children see how their brothers and sisters lived in the same house while you were with our people. Their own children. And so that they decided to end slavery because of their moral care for us. I'm supposed to believe that, when I know at the same time, if I do the timeline check on the buildup of the Industrial Revolution,
come on,
and the need for workers to have wages in order to buy the products that they were being subjugated to create in horrible, poor conditions, risking their lives to create these mass products, and that the North and the Northern industrialists needed wage earners in order to profit, to purchase their products. You can't have a cashless system in capitalism. It's just impossible. And to think that wasn't a motivation, because we weren't the only ones that worked for free, because there's plenty of those people who showed up last week, their relatives, who were maintaining working within a cashless system, providing support services for the master class to keep us in a certain position and condition. Like I said earlier, the promise, right? They fought over us again, right? Over our condition, okay? Jim Crow was the result of that. Okay, Jim Crow was our gift. Okay, so if you think that this is the second or the third Reconstruction, with the Civil Rights Movement, second Reconstruction.
No, we're going through the fourth. This is the fourth Industrial Revolution that's happening right now.
Okay. So what I'm saying is the outcomes. Let's look at the outcomes.
Right.
And I need to see an outcome where we all have enough food to eat, where
That's
none
right.
of us are living on the streets. Because if I don't see that outcome, then I think all of you are talking shit.
Well,
I think all of you are talking shit. If people are living outside and could die outside around $1 million condos,
$1 million homes they building. You can't listen. You and I, like you said, you probably couldn't afford your house now if you tried to
absolutely
buy it.
not. Absolutely not. Of course not.
Yeah,
Of course
you living in the DC area, you mess around and be house poor
in a second.
in
In
a
a
second.
second. In a second. And so there's no way. You have to show me. I just believe we are being used to perpetuate the status quo to their benefit.
Yeah.
Who does this protect the most?
Yeah.
With the change in the Democratic Party acquiring the majority. Yeah, is it a tactic? Sure. It's a mitigation tool. It's never
Sure.
to actually ameliorate any of the conditions.
Any
Right?
of our conditions. Yeah. Well, that's our time, Brother Maurice. I want to give you an opportunity we can try to end on a positive note because unfortunately we'd have talked about that people might walk away and be like, whoa, that was deep. That was a lot. But just want to give you the last word in terms of, there is hope because you are out there, I'm out here. This entire organization is built around activism and activating our community to fight for what's right, to change our conditions specifically for our children. We want child justice here at this organization. And if we center the kids, right, then everybody's conditions will improve, right?
That's
You have
right.
the last word.
No, Zakia, thank you so much for having me on Building Power, and thank you for inviting me to the Brightbeam Network. Look, and I was hesitant because it's just me. I'm hesitant because I like to be on the street. On the street is where our power is.
That's
And
where it is.
and so thank you so
That's
much.
exactly why we wanted you a part of this family. We don't want nobody that's out here faking. We
Yeah,
want people who got a pulse of the community, who has a base of community support, which you do, who have years of investment in that community. You and Chioma both are amazing, and you're really such a powerful part, just me and my family of our personal life, but also of this organization. And we thank you so much for all that you give to the young people in Washington, D.C. and in this area. So thank you so much. We're going to see you on the street again, out there in the tent cities. You're feeding our people, you're clothing our people. For people who are Christians, you are being what they say, the hands and feet of Jesus Christ. So that's amazing. Thank you, brother.
listen, I have no choice. My grandma haunts me. I have no choice in this. We have all the love and the power and the strength and the blessings to do this ourselves. There's no question. That's why we're still here. All of this stuff we were given to from our ancestors. They survived for a reason. We are that hope that they had. So
That's right.
we can do this. It's not even a thing. I don't even where God has got us. We are still alive. And that's a testament. That's a testament to the core power that we have. And let's not forget that.
That's right. Thank you, brother.
God
Have a
bless
great
you.
evening. We will talk soon. I'm going to let you get back to work.
All right. Take care now.
Peace and blessings.